Let's pray. So gracious God, our Heavenly Father, you are here present with us today. And so we thank you for making beautiful things out of us, taking the body of Jesus and the blood of Jesus and putting it in us. And somehow that does make us beautiful. So we'd ask that you'd take this true body and true blood of our Lord and Savior Jesus and strengthen us in our Christian faith. We ask and pray these things, Jesus, in your most holy and blessed name. Amen. So this morning we're going to begin a new series on this very, very short book in the Old Testament called Ruth. It's just four short chapters. And if you're reading along with us in Shift 15, we kind of shifted out of what I had assigned originally, and we read those 4 chapters this last week. And we're going to, if you're along with it, you read the first chapter on Friday, and then we're going to read chapters 2, 3, and 4. So if you look at the back of your New Hope notes, got the kind of the new schedule. And again, if you haven't been reading with us in Shift 15, it's never too late to jump in. So you've got the reading schedule. You can read all 4 chapters of Ruth. Actually, you can probably read them every day if you'd want to. It's that short of a book. So we're going to be in this series for just over the next 3 weeks. And we'll get to that in just a moment. Just a couple of real quick things. This Wednesday is Ash Wednesday, and we'll have a worship celebration here at 6 o'clock on Wednesday night. And just to let you know, so you can plan whether you want to come or not, the Ash Wednesday service always lasts right at an hour, maybe a little bit more. And it's not from me talking a lot. It's from us, all of us receiving communion, and everyone, if they choose, coming forward, kneeling, and receiving the sign of the cross with ashes. Just reminding us of the journey as Lent starts. So, and then we'll be singing lots of songs, and we'll be talking about Jesus. So that's Ash Wednesday. And then the following Wednesdays during the season of Lent, the worship celebrations always at 6 o'clock, always with Holy Communion, but they all last right around 45 minutes. And again, we've moved at 6 o'clock, so a lot of our families with young children could attend if they so choose. So that's coming up. And then just after this, I know we've got a lot of guests, and we're glad our guests are here, and you'll be able to be excused afterwards. But many of us are going to end up over in the Commons. We're going to feed you a chili luncheon with some cornbread and some honey butter, which is going to be awesome. The school is sponsoring that. And then we're going to have an information meeting as we're all eating. And so we hope to get you out of here well-fed and within an hour. And all our families, our children, everyone's invited to this. Even if you're a guest and if you want to come and hear this information meeting, it's going to be pretty good, because one of the things that we're going to talk about is what's going to happen after I get older, because I'm getting older. So it's going to be a real important piece of information that we want to share. So I want to go into this book of Ruth, and as I've been teaching and as it kind of keeps coming to me, there's so much of the Bible that it's really, really well crafted. And so we're going to look at just the first 5 verses in this book of Ruth, of this very short 4-chapter story. Because in these 5 verses, there's just so much that's packed into these 5 verses. And for years and years and years, as I'd read the book of Ruth, it's a great story. Again, I always like a short story, and so this is a short story. But I'd probably miss a lot of details. I just kind of would read for facts, and you kind of read over it. But the more that I've been thinking about this message, the more I've been thinking about this series, the more I've been looking at the book of Ruth, that when God inspired people to write down the stories and some of the things that are in the Bible, there's just so much of it that's just really, really well crafted. And there's a part that we get something every time we try and attempt to read the Bible. But I think the more that we read the Bible, the more that we just kind of make a practice and a habit, as we're trying to help you to do, not with reading the whole book, the whole Bible all the time, but just get into the Bible. And as you keep reading the Bible and keep reading the Bible, it just keeps revealing stuff to you. And so this is something that's been kind of revealed to me as I keep. So just these first 5 verses. This morning we launch into this series of Ruth. We read these words. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. So again, just that opening line in this story. First of all, you all hear Bethlehem. And for a lot of, it's just kind of Bethlehem. Right away, it's like, oh, yeah. There's something like really important that happens in Bethlehem. Like 2 months ago, we were singing, "Oh, little town of Bethlehem." Because that's where Jesus was born. The story of Ruth is told 1,000 years before that happens in Bethlehem. But the author of Ruth wants us to know that long before Jesus' birth in Bethlehem, there was something that happened in Bethlehem that in essence is going to set up the story that will happen 1,000 years later in Bethlehem. So the author is very much wanting us to know this is happening in Bethlehem. In fact, as you read through these 4 short chapters, you're going to hear that it's Bethlehem, Bethlehem, Bethlehem. The author doesn't want us to forget it's at Bethlehem. And then we're introduced to the characters, that there is this a man and his wife, and that they have 2 sons. And the other irony, the name Bethlehem actually means house of bread. But in this story, there is no bread in Bethlehem. There's been a famine. And so this husband is thinking that if I want my wife to live, if I want my 2 sons to live, we've got to go somewhere where we can eat. And Bethlehem is just kind of failing us for this season. We don't, again, have lots of details about the story. But they go over to Moab, and there's a lot that we kind of miss in that. But Moab is not the most welcoming land if you were a Jew, if you were from Israel. But it's kind of pushing all that aside because I want to live. I just want to live. And so they go over to Moab. And then we're introduced in verse 2, the names of these characters. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife, Naomi. Naomi means pleasant. That's the meaning behind her name. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. And then again, just to make sure that we know where we're at, they were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. And then they went into the country of Moab and remained there. But then the story really, in essence, takes a dark turn. It says, but Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives, and again, that really wasn't supposed to be the way it would happen. If you were a Jew, an Israelite, you should have taken a Jewish wife or an Israelite. This isn't what they did. They take these Moabite wives. The name of the one was, and here's where you got to be real careful as you're reading the book of Ruth, Orpah. Because most of the time, us as Americans, we look at it and go, Oprah. Oprah's in the Bible. No, it's not Oprah. Not Oprah. Orpah. So you just got to make sure that you know that. And she's definitely going to be kind of a side note in the story because she won't be in chapters 2, 3, and 4. But she's here in chapter 1. The name of the other, Ruth. And so this is the name of the book. And again, for us, because we've, if you come kind of from a church background, a Bible background, you know that the book of Ruth has always been there. And so you just don't really think about it. And if you kind of newer in that, the book of Ruth is just in the Bible. Maybe you've heard of it before. But that Ruth would have kind of the name of this book named after her. Because one of the things you're going to hear here in the book of Ruth and other places in the Bible when they refer to Ruth is that Ruth is a Moabitess. Ruth is a Moabitess. Again, the Bible wants to make it clear. Ruth is a Moabitess. Ruth is a Moabitess. She is not a pure Jew. She's not a pure Israel. She's a Moabitess. She's a foreigner. She shouldn't really be in the story of God, but she is. Because God wants everyone in his story. God has always wanted everyone in this story. Again, the promise to Abraham when the story starts and it's going to involve the Israelites, the promise to Abraham is that Abraham, through you and through your descendants, all the world will be blessed. Oftentimes the Israelites get it wrong. Oftentimes we as Christians can get it wrong because we think, because we're chosen, we're the ones that God has chosen, and too bad about those other people. That's never been the story of God that's written in the Bible. So the Bible wants to make it clear, Ruth is included in the story of God. And then it says they lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died. Again, it doesn't say how they died, doesn't say how the father died. It just says it just states this fact: they died. So that the woman, and they're going back to Naomi, the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. So there's a part in these first 5 verses that it just kind of, there's a darkness to it. Death is mentioned 3 times. And there's a part, if you really try to get yourself immersed into the story, you just kind of shiver. Because it ends in these first 5 verses with not a lot of hope. Just not a lot of hope at all. So, this story of Ruth is just one of these great stories, and we're going to be drawn into the story. I hope that you can get drawn into the story with me over these next couple of weeks and this morning. But oftentimes, when we get drawn into a story, usually it's set up that kind of scene 1 is much more, there's just a lot of light to it. There's a lot of warmth to it. And we just kind of start to care about, what's introduced to us as a story is beginning. And usually, once you're sort of drawn into the warmth and to the light of the story, something will go dark and we'll get kind of, and then we want to see how that story is going to get resolved, how it will end up in a warm, how it will end up back in light, because there's that moment when it turns, it kind of gets dark and cold, and again, we get kind of caught up in the story. And again, I think movies are doing this all the time. It kind of just sets us up to draw us into the story. So I'm a big fan of animated movies, and a number of years ago I watched Reel. And there's Reel 2 is coming out. But if those children, pay attention here, adults, if you don't know about Reel, I know the kids do. Isn't it Reel just a great opening? I mean, they're in South America. It's all warm. They're in the jungle. There's all these colorful birds, all kinds of colorful birds, all sorts of colors in that. And they're singing. They're doing like this mamba thing, and they're just kind of jamming out. They're just jamming out, and it's just like, and the sun is shining. There's blue skies, and they're flying through the jungles, and there's this little blue bird there that's just kind of, his little tail feathers start wiggling with the music and that, and he's just kind of, and they're just warm, and it's warm, and they're doing all this dancing. You just kind of, you got all these things going. Yeah, oh man, it's just awesome. And then as this little baby bluebird starts to fall down, as the song keeps going, then all of a sudden the scene changes and this net comes over him, this net comes over all these other birds. The picture goes black, and the next thing that you see on the screen is this cargo truck going across a frozen landscape of Minnesota. And it goes into this little town. And so we're going to hear the story of how is this little blue bird from South America end up in frozen Minnesota. Can anybody relate to things being frozen? Just kind of cold and dark. Or again, put the other movie here. And again, parents and grandparents, you don't have to. But how about Frozen? Is that an awesome movie? Again, there's the children going. They're helping me out on this one. Again, Frozen, it's all about Frozen, and it's real cold, but it starts with the big sister and the little sister playing in this palace, and the big sister has this ability, and things are freezing, and the little sister she's having fun. She's sliding here, she's flying through the air, sliding. It's just so much fun in that they're having together as big sister and little sister, until big sister kind of doesn't aim quite right, and something happens to the little sister. And I get her better again. But then, It just kind of, and then the rest of the story is just how it gets more frozen and more frozen and more frozen and more frozen until, well, I like the story. Again, spoiler alert for all of you adults, but it's not for the children in that there's a resurrection in this story. And warmth returns, not only to the landscape, but to the hearts of the sisters. So, let it go. If you don't get that, just YouTube it. It's an awesome song. I haven't gone to the sing-along version yet, but it's going to be awesome. So, and I can't wait till my grandchildren just get a little bit older. I'm going to go to all of those movies. So, when it comes to the story of our lives, don't we all just sort of have a dream, kind of warm dreams that we will just live a happy life? Again, I want to take us back 3,000 years ago to Naomi. I just imagine that Naomi, when she was a little girl in the town of Bethlehem, she had a dream like all of us have. Well, if you're a girl. She had a dream that one day she would get married and it would kind of be Prince Charming. It would just be a man that would take care of her, a man that would love her. That they would have a couple of sons. A couple of sons one day would grow up and they would get married, and then some grandchildren would come, and then in a ripe old age, after a happy life, she would die. Because again, everyone knows that they're going to die. So that's your dream. A dream of a little girl. That one day she'll get married. Or how about Elimelech? Again, as a man, he's got a dream. He's got a dream that he'd grow up and he'd be big and strong. Maybe he's like some of us that, there's a lot of boys that grow up thinking someday I'm going to be a great basketball player. I'm going to be a great, strong NFL player. Or at least I'm going to be a man of strength and character. Some of our young men go off into the service, wanting to serve and protect our country. Some young men, they have a dream that one day they will get married and they'll be a strong man, they'll be a strong husband, they'll provide for their wife, they'll provide for their children, they'll work hard. And their dream will be lived out in that way. All of us have dreams. But along the way, some of those dreams, like the story of Ruth, kind of get shattered. Again, I phrased it like this, sometimes there's this bite of cold reality. Sometimes the marriage doesn't work out. Prince Charming is not so charming. Belle is not so, she just doesn't have that kind of voice. And sometimes, the children, if there are any, and boy, what kind of pain that causes. And if there are some, sometimes what kind of pain that can cause. So there's just sometimes a cold bite of reality that sneaks into our warmest of dreams. Then you can say that sometimes I've got here, and again, forgive me, it's kind of probably preacher-esque or whatever. The bark of hot, bitter anger can enter into our dreams. Next week, we're going to look at kind of the rest of chapter 1. Naomi, when we go through the rest of chapter 1, they end up coming back to Bethlehem. Ruth goes with her. Orpah does not. When she gets back to Bethlehem and her friends, the ladies that were their same age, they had the same dreams. They didn't leave Bethlehem, but they know that Naomi did. And when she comes back and they see her and they recognize her, she says, "Don't you call me Naomi anymore. Call me Mara." And the name Mara means bitter. She is hot and she is angry. And again, the story of Ruth is so crafted by the inspired author that writes it, that it's made very clear that she's hot and she's bitter against God. We'll see that next week, or you can see it when you read towards the end of chapter 1. It repeats itself. The Lord Almighty has done this to me. The Lord Almighty has done this to me. The Lord Almighty has made me bitter. And so you read into this story of Ruth, and you read into our story sometimes. Here's where we start. Here's where we realize we are. And then this question, can there be a warm, kingdom-expanding hope? Can there be a warm, kingdom-expanding hope? We see it in this story of Ruth. Can we see it in our own lives? Can there be a warm, kingdom-expanding dream of hope that can be in our lives? Sometimes mockingly we talk about, with some of our friends and that, some of our co-workers and that, especially at this time of year as we're fighting through this #1 record-setting year of cold temperatures. Isn't it great? We're going to be #1 after this year. And you come into work and that, hey, how's it going? And they'll respond, living the dream. Just living the dream. And again, obviously we mean it in a mocking kind of way. Just living the dream. But I got this question, how expansive and warm is my dream for my life? If you were to ask that of your own life, how expansive, how warm is my dream for my life? Again, we get a lot of help with this dream. And, I don't want to kind of wreck some of the plans and maybe some of the dreams that you've been dreaming for a long time. But really, when it comes to some of our dreams is that, again, we're going to survive this winter. It's going to get warmer. Many of you have got plans, or you've already maybe filled these plans, and you've gone a place warm for at least a couple of weeks. How many have gone to a place or are going to a place warm coming up real soon? You can raise your hands. And we don't like all of you. We don't like, no. Next week, on March 10th through the 14th, the school is off that week. And so we've got plans to go to Sturgeon Bay. That's awesome. Something's wrong with that picture. But again, for a lot of us, we're going to work, and hopefully our families are going to, grow, and our kids are going to go off to college. Our kids might get married. Our kids would have some grandchildren. And eventually we got these hopes, we got these dreams that we'll be able to retire. We'll be able to retire comfortably, and we'll be able to retire and go someplace where it's warm and get out of this inane, crazy state of living here in the Midwest. But we all know how that dream ends up ending. Yeah, we can go off and retire somewhere where it's warm, but there's always death. And so if we just dream kind of the dreams of how we would like our lives, and maybe those dreams would actually come fulfilled like we dream them, but how big are those dreams? What if God has a bigger dream for you? And what if God, maybe like he does in this story of Ruth, he shatters the dream of Naomi, so that she can be included in the bigger dream that 3,000 years from the time that this story is happening, we're still talking about it and realizing there's something bigger going on here. So how expansive and warm is God's dream for my life? How expansive and warm is God's dream for my life? Let me end with these two statements. Somebody is directing my dream. Somebody is directing your dream. Oftentimes that somebody, and again, we get a lot of help with this because there's a lot of somebodies all around us directing their own dreams, and so we want to direct our own dreams too, like a lot of other people. So again, when we are dreaming about retirement, when we're dreaming about having a place in Arizona or Texas or Florida, we know that there are thousands, if not millions of couples who have had the very same dream. So it's not like it's an original dream with any of us. But because so many others dream it, we just kind of follow that dream and seem like that would be the place to go. So we're directing our own dream. dreams. What would it look like if God was directing our dreams? What would it look like if we believe that God ends up directing our dreams? Now, as you're going to hear me say next week and the week after as we go through this book of Ruth, I'm not real sure that Ruth, even at the end of the story, when there's kind of a happy, not ever after ending, because again, her husband is still dead, her 2 sons are still dead. And even though they're back in Bethlehem and she's bouncing a baby boy on her knee, I don't think she really realized how massive this story that God had brought her into. I don't think sometimes that we realize how massive is the story that God is wanting to direct us into. That God has a bigger story in mind for us than we have for ourselves. And sometimes when we thought, God's for me, gosh, it just should be a warm, happy opening scene of Rio. But oftentimes we find ourselves in places where our dreams have been shattered. Can we trust a God who has a bigger dream for us when we're no longer in scene 1? We're in scene 2, and it's dark and it's cold. And for as far as we can see ahead, we don't see any warm. We don't see how this story could turn and be warm again. We don't see how this story could bring light back into our lives. The longer I live, the more I realize that sometimes people are going to have a real cold and bitter story. And sometimes they're really, really angry at God. One of the questions that's challenging me in this series is, if I'm one that God has made warm with a warm kingdom expanding dream, no matter what it is that's happening in my life, but if I'm one that God has, how can I come near someone that is really kind of dark and cold and bitter? Not to try to just kind of warm them up because, hey, Jesus is with you and it's going to be all right. But how can I come alongside them and just say, gosh, I don't know. This pain sucks. That you can't see how it's going to end. Man, that just sucks. But can I walk with you? Can I pray? Will you come to church with me? I'm not going to have any answers. But I know, somehow I know there is a God that does. And there's lots of stories in the Bible that if you really get into those stories, man, it went dark. But somehow, God showed up. I don't know how he's going to show up in your story. Man, I believe he can. Because he showed up in my story. I'm not going to tell you, we're not going to try to have a who's got the darkest story, who's got the coldest story. I just know God is writing and directing my story. And I think he can do that for you too. Will you stand and pray with me, please? So Jesus, 1,000 years before you are born in Bethlehem, you are involved in this story that is taking place in Bethlehem. For when we read the end of the story, Naomi is holding her grandson, and his name is Obed. And then the carefully crafted story tells us that Obed is the father of Jesse, and that Jesse is the father of David, who will be king. This little backwater town that we know as Bethlehem, there's a king that comes from it. And so when we come across Bethlehem again in the Christmas story, it's because Joseph has to go back to his hometown of David in Bethlehem to be registered because of this Roman emperor, and Jesus is born there many hundreds of years after Naomi held Obed in her lap. So Jesus, we don't see the story 100 years from now, but we know that you are directing a story as only you can direct it. And so Jesus, write us into the story. Write us into your story. We ask it, Jesus, as only you can do it. Again, there might be some of us that we just have a fear that really, Jesus, if we'd let you write our story, you would shatter our dreams in ways that we would never recognize them again. But Jesus, help us not to have that kind of fear. Help us to read a story like Ruth. Help us to be around people who might be living through stories like that. But help us, Jesus, to have an ending that has a kingdom-expanding dream where it will always be warm and no darkness or no cold will ever be able to creep in there again. Help us, Jesus. Build us with that and cast out this cold, dark fear. We ask it in your name, Jesus. Amen.